In the fall of 1977, the developer who owned the Sargeant Bay beachlands dredged a breach in the berm and diverted Colvin Creek. His plan was to construct an inshore marina in the wetland behind the berm. The community was quick to react to the marina plan. Sargeant Bay was already a popular beach for the people of Welcome Woods, who had been promised the use of the beach when they bought their lots. The Seashell Marsh Society, now the Sunshine Coast Natural History Society, was opposed to the marina. The Half Moon Bay Ratepayers Association also voiced strong opposition. The hastily formed Sargeant Bay Property Owners Association soon became the Sargeant Bay Society to broaden its membership base. Opposing the marina was essentially a negative reaction. As long as the property was owned by a developer, some kind of development was inevitable. It would be more effective to come up with a positive alternative, a nature park. That obviously required funding. Many potential funders were tried. One, the BC Lottery Fund, almost succeeded. The marina and the wetland at least had water as a common ingredient. A condominium complex, however, was totally impracticable and just a wild dream. The BC Waterfowl Society, which runs the rival waterfowl sanctuary. The Area B Settlement Plan Committee. The National Second Century Fund, now the Nature Trust of BC. Development plans require rezoning, triggering public hearings, where the Sargeant Bay Society voiced its opposition and suggested alternative plans. The old cabin on the berm was used as a real estate sales office. The berm was used to store old machinery. In the meantime, there was always something of interest to watch, like these gulls. What are they doing? They are gorging themselves on a krill bloom that drifted close to the shore. Krill blooms are not uncommon in Sargeant Bay. During the next few years, no further new projects were proposed. Until, in 1985, the property was sold to a large real estate company in Vancouver. This looked like a formidable opponent. The company sold shares as tax havens for so-called sophisticated investors at $27,000 a share. Sophisticated investors are people who have a proven ability to assess risks and can withstand a loss if necessary. That's probably why only a few shares were sold. The previous owner, who still had a share in the company, started a campground on the burn. In the meantime, the tides continued to erode the soil in the wetland. The Sargeant Bay Society started to organize beach sign events at very low tides in the summer. Some species that we used to catch in these days have become rare or even extirpated in more recent years. For example, the spiny lumpsucker. And the copper rockfish. And the Bering hermit crab. The Bering hermit crabs in Sargeant Bay always used the shells of moon snails to protect their bare bottoms. Moon snails live just below the low tide line and have also become rare in recent years. The shells are often covered with hydroids, small sessile animals related to the sea anemones. They hitch a free ride that guarantees them an abundant supply of nutritious seawater. This hermit considers moving into a new shell. Watch the worm that lived in the same shell already moving into the new shell. The crab, however, wants to get rid of him. That is not easy, but a sculpin comes to the rescue. The real estate company, realizing that the future for the development of Sargeant Bay looks rather bleak, starts negotiating with the provincial government. In October of 1989, 12 years after the berm was dredged, the government bought the property for a provincial park. The park would be legislated as a Class A provincial park, offering a high degree of protection under the Park Act. The dedication ceremony was attended by several SCRD directors, members of the Sargeant Bay Society, the district manager of BC Parks, the local MLA, and the Minister of Parks. This was the original boundary of the park. Preparations for the rehabilitation of the wetland were made possible by a grant from the Habitat Conservation Fund. Thurber environmental consultants were contracted to do a hydrological assessment. Ducks Unlimited donated a survey. The Sargeant Bay Society wrote a proposal and made the drawings. The future lake would cover 1.7 hectare of the 6.6 hectare wetland. The lake would discharge into the bay via a fish ladder. The wetland as planned. The Society wrote the background report for the park's master plan. The public was given the opportunity to comment on the master plan. The fish ladder was built in Half Moon Bay in someone's backyard. It was taken to Sargeant Bay on a flatback truck and installed in the berm. An excavator dug the lake and built the island from the material, before the old breach in the berm was filled in. Finally, the breach was filled in. Heavy rains made the lake fill up in a few days. The bridge was built. The driftwood from the wetland was burned, taking care that the nearby vegetation was not scorched. The new lake with the as yet bare island, the fish ladder and the rock seen from the island. The Virginia rail is a typical marsh bird and a common bird in the Sargeant Bay wetland. Its call can often be heard, but the bird is seldom seen. The long-billed dowager is a rare visitor in the wetland. The public road allowance between Canyon Road and Sargeant Bay is outside the park boundary. It was very rocky and difficult to manage on foot as well as on a bicycle. The present path was entirely built by volunteers. Jeff Muckle and Michelle van der Net provided the manual labor. Mel Stanton used his bobcat, and Swanson supplied the material. The cherry-faced meadowhawk is not a bird but a dragonfly. They are ferocious predators among insects. This is how dragonflies lay their eggs. Sweet gale is the dominant shrub in the wetland. Chicory was introduced from Europe and is used as a coffee substitute. Nootka rose is the dominant shrub on the berm. This Brodea is rare. Gumweed is a salt-loving plant. The tiger lily is found in the forest. Chum used to spawn in the wetland. After the rehabilitation, they could make it to the creek. After restoration of the wetland, beavers started to build dams in Colvin Creek. Sargeant Bay Society volunteers cleared the dams for the first few years. The beavers built a system of 5 dams across the wetland. The dams prevented first the chum and then the coho from reaching the creek. This is a pond before the dam was cleared. This is the same pond after the dam was cleared. The new lake was not good enough for the beavers. They also built a dam at a fish ladder. Clearing the dams was an onerous job and had to be given up. Only the fish ladder was kept clear during the spawning season. The Colvin Creek Trail was built with a grant from Human Resources Development Canada. The trail opened up a scenic stretch of rainforest that was totally inaccessible to the regular public before. Immediately after opening up the creek bed in 1991, coho came to spawn again in Colvin Creek. Coho continued to spawn in the creek until 2002, even after the beaver dams were no longer cleared. This cutthroat trout was probably feeding on salmon eggs. This dipper was also after salmon eggs. Watch him diving for a salmon egg. The Triangle Lake Trail was also built with a grant from Human Resources Development Canada. At the time of the trail construction, Triangle Lake was still part of the Seychelles Provincial Forest. Therefore, the trail had to be approved by the Sunshine Coast Forest District.
Picking up the noise too, aren't you?
Probably sounded like you knocked a building.
What do you plan on doing with this film, yo?
Is Ron Basford going to see this?
The last few hundred meters of trail to build. We're getting there. Through about 250 meters or so, and we'll join to where we left from the top there. And,
the project included some sections of the Trout Lake Trail, notably the boardwalk. Triangle Lake as seen at the end of the trail. Culverts are essential components of a good trail and were made from old logs. Proposed by the Sargeant Bay Society, Triangle Lake and the trail that connects it to Sargeant Bay were added to the park under the Protected Areas strategy. On a sunny day in April, well over 1,000 students from 3 elementary schools were bused to Sargeant Bay. They were introduced to the marvels of wetlands by experts from a wide variety of government departments. It was a day they will never forget. The annual beach sign is one of the highlights of the summer program. Coastal marine life can best be observed in a semi-natural environment of a well-filtered and cooled aquarium. This is not simple. One needs large enough tanks, an elaborate biological filtering system, and compressor-driven chillers to keep the temperature low in the summer. These yellow shiners are ready to spawn. The rockweed gunnel comes in various shades of color, depending on the color of its habitat. This one swallows a skeleton shrimp. This juvenile coho, or coho fry, was born in the Sargeant Bay wetland. The pipefish, a relative of the seahorse, is more common in eelgrass. The California sea cucumber can be found by scuba divers near the northeast shore of the bay. Like all sea cucumbers, it has 7 tentacles with which it gathers its food, consisting of detritus. Particles of detritus stick to the tentacles, which it inserts into its mouth one after the other. The Cooper's dorid is a nudibranch or sea slug that feeds on sponges. The thick-horned aeolid, another nudibranch, feeds on sponges and hydroids. The hooded nudibranch is common in eelgrass beds, where it can sometimes be found by the thousands. When caught in a dip net, they can clog up the meshes in a slimy mass. They give off a peculiar smell, not unlike cucumbers. This one is about to catch a skeleton shrimp. Got you. Tube snouts can sometimes be caught in the eelgrass. They lay their eggs in rings around the blades of grass. Black-eye gobies are common among the pebbles on the southwest shore of the bay. This is how they lay their eggs and fertilize them. The spur-nose poacher has a heavily armed body. It therefore swims in a jerky way. The midshipman is strictly nocturnal. Most of the time it just sits buried in the sand, waiting for an unsuspecting crustacean to pass by. When that happens, they snap it up with their enormous mouth. Unlike most jellyfish, the clinging jellyfish is an active swimmer. It can attach itself to a substrate when it gets tired. When spawning, sea anemones release millions of microscopic eggs and sperm. Many marine worms have elaborate appendages to filter out plankton for food. The pebbles on the southwest shore of the bay used to be covered with calcareous tube worms. They are still there, but not as abundant. As more people visit the beach to look for oysters, they turn the pebbles, which is often fatal for the brittle tube worms. Shrimp come in a large variety. They are the staple food for many fish. The sand shrimp lives in the sandy beach of the bay. Look how it cleans its antennae. It often buries in the sand. Even when above the sand, it's hard to see it because of its excellent camouflage. Rock lobsters are usually caught in prawn traps in the deeper end of the bay. They are well equipped to scratch their backs. The two-spotted prawn is the prawn that is caught in prawn traps at the deeper end of the bay. In winter one can usually see some Barrow's golden ice on the bay. Canada geese breed on the island in Colvin Lake. They eat the grass on the berm. And the eelgrass in the bay. Occasionally, a trumpeter swan visits the bay. In winter, one can always find some bufflehead on Colvin Lake. Ringneck ducks can often be seen. One or two pied-billed grebes spend the whole winter on the lake. The red-winged blackbird is the most numerous breeding bird in the wetland. Mallards also breed there. The common merganser sometimes visits the wetland, as does the hooded merganser. One year it bred in the wetland. The invasive plant control project got started in 1997 by Martin Flynn. It got a big boost in 2000 with a grant from Environment Canada and Kai Goodwin as project leader. This map shows the initial relative blackberry density in the various areas. Blackberries at the trailhead on Redruce. Blackberries between the berm and the wetland. The crew that attacked the blackberries in earnest. A blackberry infestation just after it was cleared. Blackberries, broom and various other invasive plants have been virtually eliminated from the area between Redruce Road and the bay, and from the trailhead. The project has been well documented in a 29-page report. Each year, students of Half Moon Bay Elementary swarm the beach and the berm and clean up the debris that floats in from the strait. BC Parks placed a bench on the berm in recognition of the Sargeant Bay Society for its role in creating the park as we see it today. The double-seat bench appropriately looks out over the bay and the wetland. Every year, Pacific tree frogs lay their eggs in a seasonal puddle on an old logging road near the trail to Trout Lake. The male holds the female when she is about to lay her eggs. This is called amplexus. When she is ready, they dive, and she lays her eggs attached to a submerged twig. Unfortunately, every summer the puddle dries up just before the tadpoles grow legs, and they all die. A group of scouts from Gibson's decided to dig a more permanent pond for the frogs downstream of the puddle. But the pond did not hold water and dried up in a few days. Dogwood trees are common on the Sunshine Coast but don't occur in Sargeant Bay Park. Volunteers planted 12 specimens near the park entrance as a fitting memorial to Eric Hoare, the Sargeant Bay Society's very effective membership director for many years. In November, chum gathered in large numbers in the lagoon at the fish ladder. Surprisingly, the beavers did not block it this year. A coho that got into the lake but didn't make it to the creek. It might have tried to spawn in the gravel at the ladder. A dipper is often seen at the fish ladder. It may be looking for salmon eggs, but in the meantime it catches sticklebacks. In the fall of 2002 and 2003, no salmon has been seen spawning in Colvin Creek. But, surprisingly, in the spring of 2004, coho fry were found in the creek, the beaver ponds, Colvin Lake, and even in the lagoon downstream of the fish ladder. There have been 3 boundary changes since the Sargeant Bay Park was established. This was the initial park in 1989. First, the foreshore was added. Then, Triangle Lake was added under the Protected Areas strategy. And, at last, its watershed will be included.